Welcome everybody. This is the San Francisco Zine Fest Zines and Beyond panel with our panelists Amber Padilla, Fred Noland, and Rina Ayuyang. Yay! So today we're going to talk about the different kinds of art that these three make. We're going to talk about their experiences with zines and shorter work, and also then how they have moved into longer book-length work. And what they're sort of looking at into the future. So first off, I'm just going to do a little bit more of an introduction to all of us. I'm your facilitator. My name is Lauren Davis. My pronouns are she, her. This is obviously a picture of me with much better hair than I have now. I'm going to read off the screen. I apologize. So I'm a Berkeley-based cartoonist, writer, and editor, as well as the institutional organizer of San Francisco Zine Fest. Along with Mel Hilario, who's holding the door open right now, and Katie Langeway. I am part of the Eisner-nominated Triple Dream Comic Studio. I'm the co-creator of the middle grade graphic novel Debbie and Pearl Digital Detective, the upcoming graphic novel Agent Cupcake, and the Who is San Francisco poster series for the San Francisco Art Commission's Art on Market Street series. Fred Noland is a visual storyteller. His first published work appeared in Wood Eye, a mini comics anthology in the mid-90s. He continued to create work in short-run editions after relocating to Oakland in 1999, publishing a steady stream of varied, esoteric, and biographical work as part of the Bay Area indie scene and for a number of anthologies nationwide. His comics have appeared in The New Yorker. He created San Francisco Black History, a public art series for the San Francisco Arts Commission. A collection of his memoir comics, Steady Rollin, was released in 2023. He is currently working on Major Taylor, a biographical comic about the first Black world champion in road cycling, who became one of the first international sports stars. Noland resides in Oakland, California, and is an avid but unremarkable cyclist. Rina Ayuyang is a cartoonist based in Oakland, California. She has been part of the Bay Area mini-comics scene for over 20 years, sharing autobiographical stories that explore family, identity, and pop culture. Her work has been nominated for the Eisner, Ignatz, and Harvey Awards. Her new book, The Man in the McIntosh Suit, is a detective noir set in 1920s San Francisco in the Filipino community of Manila Town. And Amber Padilla is a cartoonist and illustrator based in Oakland, California. She makes mini-comics that include cute characters and themes around empathy and acceptance. She is currently working on her forthcoming YA graphic novel, Sugar-Coated, and at her day job, she hobnobs with the Peanuts gang over at the Schultz studio. When she's not drawing or crafting, she's snuggling with her cat and spending time with her husband, family, and friends. So welcome, all of you. Thank you so much for being here today. So first off, I want to ask you about your experience with zines. We have a collection of some of your various zines up here, and just kind of what you sort of would describe as what you do in terms of zine making, your experience with zine making. Amber, do you want to start?
Sure. So originally, I used to come to SF Zine Fest and sort of walk around and go like, I could do that. I want to do that, and I just never did, and it took going to CCA and the MFA in comics program before I made my first mini comic, and that was something I did as part of the program, and I still sell that comic. It's Ophelia, so it's pretty awesome. Actually, my first one was slightly different, but it was called Old Man Mala, which I haven't sold in a long time. But yeah, it's just such a great opportunity to be able to get your work into other people's hands without having to worry about like finding a publisher or even like if the group of people who want to read it is like 5 people, at least you can find your little niche of people who want to read it. So I just like crafting and DIY, and being able to put something together by your own hands is just really, really awesome. So I don't know.
Yeah, Fred?
I first came to self-publishing and mini comics after traveling up here. I'm originally from Southern California, and I traveled up here for either the first or second APE when it was still down in San Jose. And it had not occurred to my friends and me that like there could be something like an actual mini comic scene, an actual, yeah, like that it extended like a community, if you will. So when I saw the variety of work that was published there, I brought that inspiration back home and just started spinning out like different comics. Like I did like a one-man anthology a la Dan Klaus's 8-Ball called Spilkus. I did, she knows how bad that was. She's like, yeah, you did that. And yeah, similarly, I enjoyed that doing short run stuff, similar to Amber. I enjoyed that doing short run stuff allowed me to explore and cover different topics because I tend to get kind of bored doing one thing. So I could jump around and kind of work on this one storyline for a while and then go do something completely different. And I could, again, sell to like 3 people, and it's fine, I'm more doing this for me anyways. More comics for me to read. I'll read them all myself.
Yeah, I started in self-publishing like 2000, and I think SF Zine Fest was the very first show I participated in, I exhibited in, and I remember learning about mini comics when this was all sort of like through the mail, really, and I was actually really like intimidated by all the local cartoonists. So there was a while where I did not go to any like comics jams, and they were mostly guys too, I have to say. So it was just that was intimidating back in the day. There weren't that many women in the group that time, and so I kind of connected through the mail through like zine, like there'd be zines that would have catalogs of mini comics, and you could trade with these people through the mail, and then I started to make comics, my own mini comic, Namby Pamby. I had no idea what I was doing. I was photocopying it in my local print shop. I didn't know what like how things would like be reproduced. Like I was just doing my own thing, like ink wash and like that in the photocopies. It's just like the worst thing to do because like nothing comes out really well. And so for me, mini comics was a place to experiment and to just like kind of just dig in and just to share stories that I just wasn't seeing at that time, like stories about like slice of life stories, more personal accounts. Like John Porcellino was a huge influence. He did the King Cat mini comics, and so I was really inspired by that.
I'm going to go back to just our first slide, because you all have, in addition to making mini comics and zines, you've all done book-length work. And one of the things I was curious about is how you made that transition. Like, how did you connect with your publishers and make that transition from doing zines into doing longer books?
Yeah, so, I don't really do webcomics. I mostly just do the minis and sell at shows. So part of it is like, I have a few things on an Etsy. Part of it is like sending stuff in the mail takes effort. So it's really nice to be able to sit at a table, and it is one of the few places you can actually buy my minis at. But I went to SPX, and one of the editors at Little Brown saw my mini comic Sugar Coated, and so she asked, "Do you have a pitch for this?" Which I did. I had a pitch for it, and so I sent that to her, and she rejected it. But she liked my artwork, so she asked if I wanted to try out for the Secret Garden on 81st Street, which they were looking for an artist to do the artwork for. So it was really from making mini comics that I was noticed and taken seriously, because one of the nice things about doing mini comics is that not only are you finishing and completing a project, you're also like going through the effort of like promoting yourself and putting yourself in front of people. And I think that's really attractive to publishers because they're like, oh, this person isn't like shy. They don't want to like, you know, they're not afraid to meet people and talk to them about their work. So yeah, that was the transition. And then the current book that I'm working on, I don't know how David Saylor of Scholastic found me. He sent me a message. So he runs Scholastic Graphics, and I'm pretty sure it was through Sugar Coated that my mini comic, and so that one will be published through Scholastic as a full-length graphic novel. So again, it was the mini comics that led to the publishing, which is really awesome.
And for those who aren't familiar, SPX is the Small Press Expo in Bethesda, which is actually happening next weekend. Yeah. Fred?
The current book, Steady Rollin', I first came into contact with that publisher through a number of anthologies that I did over the years. I think the first one was Cringe, which was put together by a guy named Peter Conrad, who I know from the Bay Area comic scene. And after working on Cringe, it's JT Yost who used to run Birdcage Bottom. He invited me to do a couple more, Bottoms Up and Too Tough to Die. And after and he and I just like got along very well. We're both aging punks, so like, and parents, so we have that in common. And at one point I was like, hey, you know, would you be interested in putting together a collection? I did another book called Black Sheep over a number of years, and I asked if he would be interested in putting together a collected Black Sheep. And he was like, you know, I think that's swell and everything. I think he's letting me down easy. But he was like, I really connect more with people's autobiographical work, and I really like your autobiographical work. So what I'd love to do is just put together a collection of your autobio. And I'm like, absolutely, that's great. You know, I thought I'd have like 50 pages. So I was like, let me go through the archives and see what I got. And it was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, because apparently I spend a lot more time navel gazing than I'm comfortable with like admitting. And the other book that I have coming up, Major Taylor, is from Drawn and Quarterly, and the way I got connected with that publisher is Peggy started following me on Instagram, and I looked her up to see who she was, and I was just like, oh, this is, you know, an actual publisher. Like, so I started slyly putting some like work, like Major Taylor work into my feed. Just to like be like, hey, just hanging out in the studio working on this like very intricate painting of Major Taylor along with some pages. And she reached out and she's like, do you have a publisher for that? And I'm like, there's a few people who are interested, but it's still kind of in its early stages. But I'd be happy to talk about it. Don't tell her that I deceived her. But yeah, so that's how that came about.
Oh, that's amazing. My first book was Whirlwind Wonderland, and it was published by Dylan Williams, who ran Sparkplug Comic Books in Portland, and he was a huge I don't know what you call it, impresario, patriot, whatever, of the mini comic scene. And he and Greg Means, who did Clutch, the zine, mini comic Clutch, who was autobiographical comics, they had a joint venture at one time, and they published I think 4 books, books that they both agreed that they liked, and so they co-published that book, and that book was a collection of stories from Namby Pamby, my mini comic series. So how they asked, I think they were just because we were all in the mini comics community and we knew about each other, and so that's how we found each other, is that we were just always at the Alternative Press Expo that was here in San Francisco, and Zine Fest, so we were always seeing each other, and then at shows in Portland too. So that's how we built a community, and I think that's how I was able to get a publishing project, is just networking and just being a part of the community. And what's cool about the mini comics is that it creates like a body of work for you to actually have for a publisher. And mini comics also, I found out when I started to get published, is that you really find your voice through mini comics. You really find your style. And right when I met with them, I did this one mini comic that was like I was super proud of, called Doodle Days, and it was just something that, like, one year I was like, I'm just gonna like draw something every day. There's not gonna be anything, like I'm you know, it could be just a warm-up thing. There's nothing great about it, but it was just like that was a way for me to build a body of work, but also figure out my style at the same time. So that's how I got my first publishing thing, and then I actually I think I did a cold submission to Drawn and Quarterly, even though like I knew Tom Devlin, and somebody said, just why don't you just try to like, you know, submit something to Drawn and Quarterly. And Drawn and Quarterly is one of like the big two indie, you know, comics publishers at the time, and yeah, they just accepted me. So they did Blame This on the Boogie, which was another collection of stuff I was doing at that time, like web comics at that time, because everything was on the web instead of minis. But so that's how I got here. So.
About a couple of those books that we were talking about. So Steady Rollin' and Blame This on the Boogie. So both of these books are made up of like smaller slice of life comics. And so I was wondering for both you, Fred, and you, Rina, what's the curatorial process for that like? Like, how do you go about selecting those things? How do you go about putting them in an order? Like, what does that process look like?
Well, when I did Blame This on the Boogie, it was an anthology, a collection of stuff I was doing, comics that I posted on the web or I did in a mini comic form. And so the way we curated that was just trying to find the connecting threads between those stories and connecting themes. And so the theme was pretty much like family and navigating childhood to parenthood. So like navigating like my perspective as a child and becoming a parent and having that same experience, but through your child, like the school experience, but through your child's point of view. So there was, it was also like an homage to American musicals. So there was this whole thing about the theme of escapism from the reality, like harsh realities of like, you know, being bullied, or like harsh realities of parenthood, or like harsh realities, I think it was during like the Donald Trump election time. So it was this whole thing of trying to escape all of these horrible things that were happening. And so that was the connecting thread, and so it led to like this long story of like Dancing with the Stars, and so it was all about themes of family, pop culture, woven into, what did I say, fantasy already? But yeah, so that there was just finding connecting themes for that. And so we tried to bridge those desperate like stories, and I bridged them with like smaller like kind of stories in between to get the flow right. I don't know if it worked, but that was what our strategy was for doing that.
For me, the collection brings together stories that I have been doing since like 1998. Like for like early mini comics, I did work that I just did in my sketchbook when I was commuting or in the office, or if I had some downtime between projects to stay limber, I always try to work in my sketchbook, like, you know, do short comics in there. Some of it was taken from The New Yorker, some of it was taken from a few different anthologies I did. And the way I pieced it together was trying to put together a through line from like basically chronologically, so covering early childhood and my teenage years and my early adult years and my middle adult years and my elderly adult years and like, you know, the COVID era. Like I just tried to put it together chronologically. What was a little tricky is here and there, something would happen, you know, in the modern era, you know, or at a different point, and it would make me flash back to an earlier time. So I had to figure out like, okay, is this like, you know, a modern comic or is it a childhood comic? Like where does it sit? And it's also what I enjoyed about it, but probably what some people maybe hated about it it jumps around a lot in style because I never did these with any thought of collecting them. I did them just to make them, you know. So yeah, it's a little skitzed out at times, but I think that's half the fun of it.
So I want to talk about the man in the McIntosh suit, which is amazing, and I hope somebody makes a movie out of it, if you haven't read it. So this is really very different from Blame This on the Boogie. This is a novel. It is structured as a novel, and it's also a historical novel, so it required a lot of really intense research. What was the process like for this, and how was that different from your slice of life work?
Yeah, it was extremely different just because I'm so used to doing autobio, and it's so automatic to tell a story that you've experienced, and really what you're doing is documenting and sharing this story to the world that's already happened. And with this one, this was my first real foray in a long time in fiction, and especially historical fiction, so I really wanted to get it right. And so our process for this one was I worked really closely with my editor in Toronto Quarterly. It was pretty transparent from the beginning. I had this whole story outline. It changed it towards the end. Of course, usually it always switches. Act 3 is always different than when you come in. But so it was I did a storyline, and I did stuff I don't normally do, because I usually do stream of consciousness, spontaneous stuff, sketchbook, stories that just come straight from my sketchbook. And this one was I did scripting, I did thumbnails for everything, I did each page, I written a dialogue for each one, and then I sent it to my editor so it was transparent, showing them what was happening, and all this and so it was just trying to make sure knowing the beats, and if the story arcs were meaningful. But there was a lot of research that went on, but it was during the pandemic. We were in shelter in place. We couldn't, things were closed. And so I was really thankful that a lot of universities and ethnic studies programs, especially San Francisco State, had a digital archives of this whole world in the 1920s of a place that doesn't exist anymore, which is Manila Town. And just stories from these men who were farm laborers at that time. And so there was all that, getting all that, and libraries too. Libraries had all of this, photos online of the time period, and also newspapers had all the articles from that time, all the anti-Filipino propaganda stuff was very easy to access. So I was really thankful for that, especially during the pandemic. So there was that type of history that I had to make sure I was trying to be as accurate as possible, but also keeping my voice and creating stories for these characters that were in that world. But there was also a personal historical significance, because my family came to the U.S. during that time, so there was this feeling of still doing autobio, because there were people that I knew that were in that world. So that was very easy to get into that world, coming up with characters and dialogue because of knowing that voice already. So yeah, it was a really cool mix of adding autobio and fiction, because I really wanted to do detective comics for a while, ever since I was doing Whirlwind Wonderland. So yeah, it was just a good fit, I think.
Very nice, yeah. And I highly recommend, if anybody hasn't read it yet, definitely go check it out.
Yeah, Silver Sprocket has some copies at their table, I think.
Perfect. And Fred, I don't know if you can talk much about what your process is like on Major Taylor.
I'd actually done a mini comic version of the Major Taylor story years ago, long before I thought to expand upon it or had the opportunity to. So I'd already done a bit of research on the subject, and I'm, a cycling fan of the object, not of the sport. So I knew a fair amount of the history, but much like Rina, like I got the contract during the pandemic, so I was just like, what else am I gonna do? Like I can go out and ride, or I can come home and just get on the internet or like, research. There is a lot of time available for that. So, and sadly, there's not a ton of books about Major Taylor that are around. There's like 3 or 4 good ones. So I had to really dig. I found some old art. He was really famous in France, at the turn of the century. So I found some old articles, more for photo reference, because sadly I don't speak French, so I couldn't. Yeah. But yeah, so there was a lot of, and I really enjoy history. So digging into that it didn't even feel like work. It was just something that I would have eventually done anyway.
That's so cool. And then Amber, you're working on a book-length version of Sugar Coated, your teen book, and you've had a zine version of Sugar Coated for ages, a long time. When we were in school together, that was your thesis, right? Yeah. And so I'm curious, how has the project changed as you've been turning it into a full-length book?
Yeah, so because I'm working with Scholastic, they're really specific about like the types of books that they publish. So I had a version of the story, and when I was like submitting it to other publishers, a lot of them wanted to eliminate most of the characters, or they wanted to focus on a different relationship, and I was like, well, I made this story so that I would enjoy drawing things that I really like, and the main character, she bakes, and I myself am not really a baker, but I love the way sweets look, so sweets are in my artwork quite a bit, as you can see. So, and where was I going with this?
Just having publishers who connected with what you wanted to draw.
Yeah. Oh, and working with Scholastic, they were the first publisher to say like, no, we like your concept, and the concept of the story is the main character is a catfish, and so again, the other publishers were like, no, we don't want that story. We want so.
And you don't mean a literal catfish.
Oh, yeah, not a literal catfish. A girl, somebody who steals someone else's photos and uses them for their social media account, and so it's a romance. So there's a lot of like drama involved, and similarly, I really like slice of life stories, and I like soap operas and shoujo manga, and I love the idea of teenagers like falling in love and or not, or falling into drama. And so the process of the zine, which the first time I published it, it was at SF Zine Fest, which the first time I sold it to people. And I even did a reading at SF Zine Fest, the Thinking Captions, which was years ago now. So there were quite a few people who were like, when's the next story gonna come out? And I was like, I'm gonna do it. And then finally, found the publisher to work on it. And it has changed quite a bit. And I think the number one thing that I was like, this is absolutely needs to be in here. Was like the catfish part, the baking. And then there's a character, she's the catfish's subject. So she's the person whose photos have been stolen, and she plays a role in the story. And I was like, she needs to be in there because people who do read the mini comic, they love her. And like I've had like these personal interactions with people who are reading it. They love this character. I am not getting rid of her. She needs to be in it. So yeah, so that was a really big influence. To be able to like talk to people and know their reactions and see what they like, was able to carry that into the process of what I'm working on right now. So yeah, pretty cool.
That actually goes nicely into the next question that I was going to ask all of you, which is about just reader feedback, audience feedback, and how people connect with your work. Is it different in zines and mini comics versus with books? I mean, I imagine that you might get the feedback in different ways. What's the experience like, and how is it similar or different?
Well, at least so with my first graphic novel, which The Secret Garden at 81st Street, which is it's based off of the original novel, The Secret Garden. When it was released, I worked on it in 2020, so it was another like pandemic project. And when it was released, we only had like a video release party with the author and myself, and yeah, what was the question?
What does the feedback look like?
Yeah. So the feedback is different because, like, with a book that's being published by a major publisher, you're getting like information from like people doing big reviews, or like there's also like Goodreads and stuff, or people putting reviews on Amazon, which I never read and I never will. But there's also like knowing that it's being sold. So it was sold at a Target, which is huge. Like the amount of coverage that like Target has, so the audience that it has, and like someone who may or may not be as interested in comics may pick it up. It's like associated with an older series, so like, or book. So that helps a lot. So again, it's really different because it's a little disconnected. You don't really know how people are responding, and it wasn't until recently I tabled somewhere where kids were coming up to me and saying, "I read this," because I know they're reading it, because the book is being sold. But I'm not like having that same sort of interaction that I get at a Zine Fest when people will be like looking at it and flipping through it, and it's like, this is really cute. Wow, I love this. It's such a different experience, and it's something that like I encourage people to do all the time, because that connection you have with people right then and there is so magical. So yeah, that's the difference for me. Very long-winded.
For me, the feedback with minis is almost exclusively at shows, because that's where they get into people's hands. So if you do a show year over year, you'll find this audience that comes back to you and will actually like engage you on the subject. But apart from that, like, you just don't really hear. If you're not at the show, you don't get too much feedback. That's been my experience with the book, because it gets reviewed places, and like people actually know. They don't have to know you to know that it exists. You don't actually have to go out there and flog it quite as hard. There's been a lot more interaction, via email, via social media, where people will actually reach out and say like, "Hey, I read this." Fortunately, it's all been positive. Nobody's like given me any like, I'm sure it'll happen, but so far, like, nobody has like rained on my parade. But yeah, like, people actually email and contact me more with the graphic novel than they did with mini comics.
I think for me, it's the type of like audience, I guess, where the feedback comes from. Like with mini comics, it was very much like my co-creators or like colleagues that were also in the mini comics community. So that was sort of like the mini comics scene was like building that community of creators, so knowing everybody. So I mostly got feedback from other creators, and that helped with like actually improving my comics making too, because I would get creator feedback more than like reader feedback. And then with like the publishing stuff, I don't know. I feel like there's the feedback has changed in that it's more like coming from people who have read it, read my books, or like libraries or librarians. Definitely like teachers, professors have used it. Used my book for like auto bio classes. So that the perspective of like of the feedback is different in with mini comics versus publishing for me. Yeah, and just like getting like feedback from like random places, like has been more so with being with a publisher, like also getting reviews, which is like our the promotion, the PR department and marketing department and John Coley are really great with getting the book out. And I think that was always the issue with me was like I was just not really good at promoting my own work. Like I'm always good at promoting other people's work, and I even tried to like do a mini comic like, imprint to like promote other people's work. And so having a publisher really helps those people like me who are self-deprecating about their work and push it in and like think like this is the New York Times can like read this. Yeah, we should send it to them. Like I would be like, what are you talking about? So like having people championing you, I see that a lot more in the publishing world for me, which has been really helpful for me in getting the word out and like stories that not a lot of other writers have been, like just being able to be like seen in a bigger lens was really helpful.
And then for all of you, what is the future of your art making look like? Do you still see yourself putting out more zines and minis? Do you see yourself focusing more on books? Fred and Rina, I know you both have done public art in the last year or two. So just kind of what is right now, what does the future look like for you and your art practice?
Yeah, so yeah, like saying before, I'm working on Sugar Coated, and my hope is that it'll be more than one book, and I can continue the story with the other characters in the series. But we shall see if it does well or not. And otherwise, I think I'm gonna keep making minis just because sometimes you just want to like, I don't know, just do a really quick fan art thing and put it out there, or because you don't have to consult anybody. You could just make something and put it out there, and no one is going to stop you but yourself, really. So I don't think I'm ever going to stop making minis, and it's like the number one thing I tell people to do, whether it's minis or like if you write or you do poetry. Like my husband, for instance, he recently went through a MFA writing program, and he was like submitting stuff to other like publications, and I was like, why don't you just make a zine? And I was like, how many people read these like publications? It's probably not that many people, but if you have a zine, I'm pretty sure he sold more of the zine than he would have ever, and got it in front of more people than he would have ever gotten in front of just getting it into some small little publication. So it's just a great way, and you can like take your zine or mini comics and take them to your local comic book store, your local bookstore who takes zines, and they love to promote people who are local. So like, you don't need to wait for a publisher to put your book to a bookstore. You could just take it, and they'll put it in the bookstore. So yeah, I think that's my advice along with what I'm doing. And I'm also on the committee for the Latinx Comics Art Festival, which happens in Modesto, and I have some flyers. Anyone wants? It's a really fun show. There's lowriders that come in, so if you want to see lowriders, it is a spectacular show. And if you want a table, I highly recommend it. It's a hugely like close-knit community of creators, and it's a fun show. So really, I would love it if you came. And that's going to be March 23rd, or March 22nd to 23rd of next year. So.
I will probably always do minis because there's a fair amount of my creative output that no publisher would ever want to touch, but I still want to get out, that I still want to bring into the world. And it's satisfying, for me creatively. It's also a good way for me to not worry so much about pleasing an audience. It's really a vital part of my creative practice. So I don't envision a time in which I'm not going to have at least one mini come out, every couple of years or so. As far as publishing with an actual different publisher goes, I have a long list of things that I want to get done in the next 10 years. Most of it's in the genre of Black history. Major Taylor was just the start of that, and I realized how many other Black historical figures have just been lost in the shuffle. So yeah, there's other subjects I want to touch on in that respect. I'm sure I'll do other things, but that's my main focus.
Yeah, I agree. I totally with you guys. I think I'll always be doing mini comics too, just at least to try to. It's just a place again, to experiment with different stories, or that you might want to make into a bigger project, and also just different styles that probably wouldn't work well in a big publishing project, like different tools or different There's this one mini comic I'm doing for part of this residency, and I'm doing it all in pastels, which probably would not work for certain publishers, but it's something I want to just get out there and share. And it's sort of like an art book, so it's like an art zine. So making a mini comic in that way, it makes sense. So I think mini comics there's always going to be a place for mini comics in our comics making, and not just in mini comics, but like you said, public art. I think that's like a new thing now that a lot of cartoonists are getting into, and online, social media, Patreon, and going back to just serializing things. I actually the man in the McIntosh suit. I kind of see various different formats for continuing that story. Not just a set of books, but just I've always wanted to do comic strips, even though that's it's a dead thing. There's no newspapers anymore. But for me, that's something I always wanted to kind of have, and a practice that I've always kind of wanted to learn more about, just making a comic strip. So I think comics and zine making is just a great, mini comics and zine making is just a great platform for just doing really anything you want to do. And that was the cool thing about when I came into comics, is that was what I was really excited about, is just do it yourself, doing your own, writing your own stories, writing stories that weren't superhero stories, or the stories that were happening at that time. They were stories you can write about, personal stories. So I think I think again, mini comics is always going to be there.
I think that's really interesting because people love comic strips. But yeah, there aren't as many platforms for them as there used to be.
Although I mean, I guess there are formats now, and you can they're in book format. I think a lot of people have figured out how to create a comic strip, or doing a one pager, and making it into a collection, into a larger story. I think Dan Klaus did that with Wilson, where they were just a one page story, but it was part of a larger thing. I think that's how he worked.
Yeah, or you see them on Instagram where people are using the flip through format for that. But yeah, I don't know. It's just cool to know that people are still using minis as a way to sort of connect with an audience in a format that audiences still really like.
Yeah, and in a serialized format, in an issue format. That's not really anything that people are focused on, artists or cartoonists are focused on anymore, because that's not the market. And so I think the mini comic scene is that is the place to do that now, and also to get full control of it. Full control of how you want it to be presented and what you want to write about. Yeah, it's always going to be the place for it.
Great. Well, thank you all. Before we finish up, I wanted to just see if there were any questions from the audience. Yep.
You guys touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear about how you market your stuff, aside from going to Zine Fest and like what you're doing kind of in between fests to get more readers.
That's funny.
Tell me what you do.
I am like notoriously terrible at social media. Like, I didn't even promote this this panel. Yeah, I think that's like the best way is social media. I really just mostly just do these shows and community building, I think, is the other component of it, because when you meet other creators will promote you and you will promote them, and it's a big like networking thing, and you suddenly find yourself in this community of artists, and they're like pushing for you, or they're like blurbing for you or something. So yeah, I'm again terrible at social media. I think it's useful if you are good at it, but it's a lot of work. But yeah, I think that's me.
I mostly social media, like I'm on Instagram. That's the only one that I'll do, because I feel like it's such a time suck for how little you get out of it. So, and yeah, similarly, networking with other artists, like that is really important, because they'll keep you honest, they'll keep your work good, and they also have a vantage of it that you don't have. Like there's like I'm sure you guys are better, but like there's a real inherent low self-esteem that a lot of cartoonists have, where we're just like apologetic, like, would you like to buy my book? I think it's not terrible. And tabling with other people, like working with other people, they have always been way better about getting me out there than I've been for myself. They treat me with far more kindness than I reserve for myself.
Yeah, I think also just like being open to all the different avenues of promotion. So like, if you have like the energy, like, you know, e-newsletters, having a mailing list, like social media, I don't really do that, but I know a lot of people that have really good, you know, mailing lists that like that do newsletters and like Patreon subscriptions. Like that's another good way to promote your work, and to also have people know what you're working on, so they're excited about it, and also will share that with, like, you know, share the word. I'm mostly on social media too, and you know, I just try to post something interesting, like, I don't know, twice a week or 3 times a week. I don't really know what, like, it's changed, like the whole, like, what's the best time to like post and all that, and how many times. It's always fluctuates, so you just really don't know. So you kind of have to keep abreast of those things, those trends. But like, I've just mostly, because I'm like so self-deprecating, I don't like I just always think mine is the worst. So like, it's very helpful, like these guys said, that to be a part of that community that, you know, champions your work and you champion each other's work. Like comics, to me, is like, has been like the most inclusive community that I have ever been a part of. Like I've been in like the art computer like .com community. And maybe it's because we're all like, this is low stakes, and like, at least when we started, it was super low stakes, where it's like, no one's gonna see this. But that, yeah, it's like the most inclusive and exciting, and it's like the place where you can be a writer and you can be an artist and you can do that together, and you can experiment with so many different things. So and also right now, like with publishing, like being with a publisher, it really helps that there's a marketing team behind you that really, so if you're going to be in like finding a publisher, find a publisher that really gets your work and supports it, and will like support it like through thick and thin, and really support like the risks and the message you want to send out to the world. So yeah.
When you're working with a publisher, do they request a lot of changes, or do they just take things as is, or how does it work?
I think it depends on the work. It depends on the publisher. I have a friend. She's also working on a YA graphic novel, and the publisher she's working with, they were pretty hands off, and she did what she wanted. And for myself, I feel like it's been a really collaborative process with Scholastic. I feel like my editor is my collaborator, and you know, when you're working with a publisher that has such a huge reach, they're really concerned with making sure that it has enough resonance with a larger group of people. So it's in their best interest to work with you to get it to be as easy to read for a large group of people. So I actually have been really enjoying that collaborative process. I don't know if it's for everybody, but it's making the story so much better. And I'm really happy with how it's coming along. So, yeah.
My publisher's been fairly hands-off. There's the only like changes that have been recommended, and it's never been like you have to make this change. It's always been like, if you want more people to see this, you know, perhaps you should soften your message a little bit, because like dealing with racism in Major Taylor, she was like, if you want to use certain language, you're going to take that out of a young adult audience and it's going to bump it up into this other audience, and you're looking at like losing 50-60% of your readership. And I was like, that's honestly a sacrifice that I can make, because I want I can get the point across, I can like not soft pedal how bad it was, without making it exclusive, without like losing people, without losing readers. So that was interesting, because like on my own, I would have just completely lost everybody and just like made it like just the most caustic, like, see how bad you people are, see how horrible like this country is. Like, it's not the point, you know, like that's not going to help anybody. It's not going to help the book for me to like be so like, you know, beating the drum. So that's been the only like changes that I've gotten. They also insist that I don't make really creative misspellings, and that's like yeah, because I can misspell really, really well. Like where you're just like, I have no idea how you even arrived at that spelling of that word. Small sacrifice to make. That's also another reason to keep doing mini comics, because like, you know, I'm not gonna proofread this thing. Like, you're gonna have to decode it, because like there's gonna be some very creative, some very unintentionally creative writing.
I have sold many comics that were stapled incorrectly.
Missing pages.
Missing pages. And
Yeah, they got to do the work, you know, figure it out.
Yeah, that's part of comics reading, do the work. With my publisher, yeah, I had an editor, and they were there if I had any questions or had any like reservations about where I wanted the story to go, or like if I just wanted their feedback on something like what I was working on. So they were available. I know like other publishers that are really, they're there throughout the whole process and have a lot of feedback and with every single like decision you make. That hasn't been my experience. There are actually some times where I've actually like kind of wanted a little bit more feedback, but I've actually been really appreciative about how they just kind of let me do my own thing. But also are kind of guiding me through this whole process of like how Fred said, like guiding me through like navigating through like this new audience that this book will probably, you know, see. So yeah, so like it really depends on the publisher. I know like, so Drawn and Corley again is like hands off, but they also, if you want like help, if you want a real collaborative editorial experience, they will do that too. So
We have time for one more question, if anybody else has any questions. Yep.
If you could give any advice to someone who's starting off,
I would say like just make something. Yeah, like it doesn't, like, even though I'm being published, I still go in like not knowing if it's very good or you can't go in saying like, well, it needs to be perfect before I can get it out there and show people, because your version of perfect may be someone's version of, or like overly done or overworked or whatever, and it's just good just to get it out there. It doesn't. I find work that is like not super well drawn even to be incredibly charming. I sometimes like that even more. So like, it's okay to start wherever you're starting, because like you're just getting your stories out, and you get better as you go. Like we've been talking about, you can experiment and find your voice and like find out what you actually like drawing, because like you don't want to get stuck drawing something that you hate, especially when you're working on longer form things. So it's also, again, doing these short comics, the mini comics, is just a great way to make something from beginning, middle, and end, and not be overcommitted to 250 pages. You give like, 8 pages, 4 pages, 2 pages, like, you just start, do something.
Yeah, just start, keep a sketchbook. Draw a lot, don't worry about it being good. Like, how you get good is just by repeating. What's really important is like, you got to find community, and you have to keep good people around you, because if you don't have good people around you, that's going to suck your creative energy. That's just in life in general. Don't hang out with people that suck. I had to learn that at a very late age, so I'm hoping I can impart that to as many people who are younger as possible.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's really good advice that they're giving. Like, totally just do it. Like, just start, make a zine, and like, and it's a learning process, like the whole thing. Like, I remember when I started out, I had no idea what I was doing, but I just felt the need to like share my stories and to draw and to share my drawings with the world, and then I just learned from it. I learned how to make a better book. I learned how to like reproduce a book better, for example. Yeah, not to be too much in your head about it. I know, like, we're talking about like kids, but like, I have a kid who, like, if it isn't perfect the first time, like say if he's like practicing like a piano or something, if it's not perfect, he'll just drop it and stop. And he doesn't understand, like, the whole thing is like, it's a process of like, learning. Like, you're never gonna get it like the first time. Like, that doesn't make sense. So like practicing, like Fred said, and like practicing drawing, and also writing. If you want to be a cartoonist, like, writing is super important. So reading other books, like prose, or reading other types of formats, not just comics, is really important. And also just looking out and looking at art and looking at things that are exciting and inspirational, and that brings out so much more interesting stuff from your work.
I would add one more thing, like, it's okay when you're first starting out to like copy your favorite things. Like, I think most artists I know, they started off like at least for myself, I was copying Sailor Moon artwork, or my table mate, she draws a lot of Dragon Ball stuff, and like, you learn about what you like, because if you're already attracted to this person's artwork, then maybe that's the kind of artwork you want to make, and or maybe learning how they draw will teach you, like, oh, they draw hands like this, and then suddenly you're drawing hands, and like, you can do it from memory afterwards. So yeah, copying, I say, is a great skill. Don't pass it as your own work, but it's a great way to learn.
I tried to copy Peanuts, and I just knew that you just could not do it.
It's very hard. It's very hard.
Yeah, just because something looks simple doesn't mean it's actually fun.
Yeah.
That's true.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to end that there. But thank you, everybody, for your wonderful questions. Yeah. Thanks also to Rob Marino for providing ASL interpretation, and to Fox Nakai for filming. And thank you again to our wonderful panelists. I also want to mention our fiscal sponsor, Intersection for the Arts. SF Zine Fest is a member of Intersection for the Arts. It's the reason that we're able to function as a nonprofit. It's really a wonderful organization. Intersection for the Arts is a bedrock Bay Area arts nonprofit that provides people working in arts and culture with fiscal sponsorship and resources to grow. It's a big reason that we are in this space today. It's a big reason that San Francisco Zine Fest has continued to grow, and that we're just able to provide a place for these conversations to happen and for the zinesters that are here today to do their thing. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, we'll have the spotlight panel with Maya Kobabe at 3, I think. So if you want to come back for that, you are certainly welcome to do that, and enjoy the rest of the fest.